topic is quite appropriate because we chose to speak about health tips from Mishle. First thing to note is Mishle is a book written by Shleima Melech, as the first pasuk tells us, Mishle Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael, which is translated loosely as the Proverbs of Shlomo, the son of David, who was the king of Israel. The word Proverbs is a little bit of a misnomer because there's a lot more here than just Proverbs. And therefore, I would like to translate the word Mishle as wise words from Shlomo, the son of David, who was the king of Israel. The Malbim points out three aspects. Firstly, these were sayings of Shlomo, who was the wisest man who ever lived. In his own right, he had tremendous depth of wisdom, and therefore these words certainly deserve taking notice of. Secondly, he was Ben David. He was the son of David HaMelech, and therefore he would have had traditions transmitted from his father, his very great father, David HaMelech, as we all know from the words of Tehillim, how profound the lessons are there, and therefore Shlomo was brought up in that household. He was the son of David. Thirdly, says the Malbim, he was Melech Yisrael, the king of Israel. Now, as you all know, the Jewish people are known for their great intelligence, and they're known for the people of the book, that they're sensible people, and they question things. They don't take everything just for granted, but they use their understanding to try and understand what the concepts are, and if they don't understand it, they'll tell you they don't understand it. So therefore, the people of Israel, who are a wise and clever nation, as it says, the Klal Yisrael are known for their great wisdom. If he was the king of Israel, certainly he was capable to guide them by his own knowledge and lessons. And therefore, we'll turn to chapter 3, because that's the first chapter where he starts talking about the advantages which we gain by studying his works. He says, I'll translate in English, it says, my son, do not forget my teaching, and let your heart keep my commandments. Because for length of days and years of life and peace will they add to you. In other words, this is a moral code which has got certain dynamics to give us a length of days, or shnois chayim. The Malbim again points out that there are 2 points here. There's oirech yomim, which is a fact, a length of days, but also that the years should be filled of vitality. There should be healthy years. Therefore, they are shnois chayim, v'shalom, and peaceful years, yosifu lacha. So if we take note of the lessons of the Torah, therefore we can only gain thereby. And what do we gain? We gain what we desire the most, which is to have a long and happy and healthy life. And that's what we're told here, to take note of the words of the Torah, because it's oirech yomim u'shnois chayim v'sholem yosifu lecha. They will add days to your life. Then we have another pasuk. It says in pasuk ches, rifus tehi l'sarecha. It will be a healing for your body, v'shikui la'atzmoisecha, and like a medicine for your bones. So the words of the Torah in general, and the words here in Mishle in particular, can give us advice of how to get good health. Rifus tehila sarecha, for your body, for your skin, is going to give you healing. And shikui is also a nourishment la'atzmoisecha. The bones, as we know, they build the fabric of the person, and it's covered in flesh. So we're told not only the outside body gains, but also the bones themselves. The bones will benefit from these words of wisdom. Looking again, we have another pasuk in chapter 3:17. Oirech yomim bimina. Its length of days is in its right hand, bismoila osha v'chavod, and in its left hand are riches and honor. And then we're told that its ways are darchin noyam, are ways of pleasantness, v'chol nesivoseh shalom, and all its paths of peace. So already we're being taught something here, that a person, sometimes his emotions can get the better of him. And therefore we're told to choose a path of peacefulness, of pleasantness. We have a road to walk on and a road we can travel on, and that is the road of the Torah. Dorocheha, its road, its ways, are darchei noam, are ways of pleasantness. V'chol nesivoseh, and all its paths are shalom, are peaceful. So it teaches us, go travel down the road of peace, travel down the road of pleasantness, be in this optimal state, try and avoid friction and strife, because to go in a way and to be aggressive, it's only going to be yourself who's the loser. If you, however, you're trying to be kind, you're trying to be polite, then you'll gain yourself. As we know, there's a concept of road rage. So what is road rage? Someone's driving down the road and he feels offended by the driving of someone else. So what does he do? He gets upset, he gets angry, and he starts making reactions. Of course, it can lead to terrible consequences. Most often than not, the one who gets angry loses himself more than the subject of his anger. And therefore, we're told, avoid friction, avoid strife, avoid machlokes, try and always travel down the ways of pleasantness. Be calm, be happy, be polite. V'chol nesivoseh shalom, and all its paths will lead to peace. And then Pasuk following tells us, Eitz chayim hi lemachazikim ba, it is a tree of life for those who hold fast to it. V'soimcheha me'usha, and those who uphold it are happy. So that's also a big incentive to follow the words which are going to come, because the Torah is considered like a tree of life. Now, what's the difference between a tree of life and a normal tree? I mean, every tree has got life in it. The difference is, if a person is underwater and he needs to grab onto a log of wood in order to keep his head above water, that piece of wood becomes a tree of life for him. A person's drowning in a situation, if he grabs onto these lessons, he grabs onto these concepts, it will raise him up above from the situation he's in, and therefore he'll be able to conduct his life in a better way. One of the most interesting points is that the people have control over their emotions. A person automatically assumes that he's a victim of circumstances. He can't help himself, whatever situation he's in. But in actual fact, a person has got the power inside him to control his feelings, to be within peace within himself, not only psychologically, but spiritual well-being. They go hand in hand, and therefore long life and harmony is within grasp, is within your power. We know that bad emotions can upset the metabolism of a person, and therefore we're going to be advised to choose the optimal way, to be upbeat, to be positive. And these are lessons which come through quite openly in the Pesukim here in Mishle. It brings to mind a story where I was walking in Yerushalayim and I met on Rechavia, and I met an elderly Jew sitting on the bench. And so I walked past him and I wished him a good morning. And on the way back, I thought, he looks an interesting type of character. Probably, it's worth drumming up a conversation with him. He was just enjoying the beautiful sunshine there, the beautiful weather. And so on the way back, I said, have a good day. So he tells me, he says, every day's a good day. Anyway, he started the conversation. He said, every day's a good day. It's all in your mind. So I thought, well, listen, let's learn some more from him. His name is Rabbi Yehuda Kinderman, and he must have been well in his 90s. He was, in fact, a Holocaust survivor. I saw he had the number on his arm, and he told me he was a teacher in the Radomsk yeshiva, and his father was a dayan in Radomsk. And looking on his face, he didn't seem to have very many wrinkles. It didn't seem to show his age through properly, because he had this positive attitude that every day, whatever situation you're in, you can make it a good day, because it's your mind which is going to be controlling the matter and the situation. This idea comes through on a pasuk in chapter 17, verse 22. The pasuk says, Leiv someach yetiv geha, that a merry heart enhances the body. V'ruach necheya tiyabesh gorem, whereas a wretched spirit dries the bones. And Rashi says on this pasuk in Yud Ches, chapter 17, verse 22, Rashi says a very interesting point. The Leiv Someach, a happy spirit, Yetev Geha, that will make his outlook better. Says Rashi, when a person is happy in his lot, then his face will shine. If you're genuinely happy and you accept what the situation you're in, then things will brighten up for you. Your face will shine. The panim of a person is a reflection of his inside, a reflection of his panim, of his inwardness, because it's only in your face that your emotions show. If you're happy and you put your hand up, no one can see on your hand your happiness, but they can see on your face. If a person's got a smile, it shows through on his face. And therefore, Leiv Someach, if you've got a happy heart, Yetiv Geha, it shows on your face, says Rashi, your face will shine. But the Mitzudos adds an extra dimension to this. He says like this, that the happiness a person has will be beneficial for his body, kidvar Refua, like taking a medicine. Whereas the shivron ruach, if a person is downcast, downbeat, broken-hearted, then tiyabesh moyachad somos, it'll dry out the marrow in his bone. Because what gives the bone life is the marrow inside it. That is the innermost of a person. Inside his bones, he has the bone marrow. And if a person is downbeaten, downcast, and downhearted, it will affect him not only from his face on the outside, all the way down into his bones, and inside the bones into the moach in the bones. I'll read it again. Says the Mitzudos, Hasimcha teitiv laguf. Happiness is beneficial for the body, kidvar Refua, like taking a medicine. V'shivron ruach, whereas a broken spirit, tiyabesh, will dry up, moyach somos, the very marrow inside your bones. So it tells us that a person has the ability to have a happy spirit, and then it will be beneficial, or the opposite, to be downhearted and a downbeat spirit, and that is certainly not beneficial. The most common types of problems which a person sees in life is that of anxiety. And I just printed off from the NHS guide. It says, anxiety, every mind matters. And he says, are you feeling anxious? Anxiety is something everyone experiences at times, and feeling anxious is a perfectly natural reaction to some situations, which means to be anxious in moderation is quite normal. It says, but sometimes feelings of anxiety can be constant, overwhelming, or out of proportion to the situation, and this can affect your daily life. If a person is anxious too much, then it's already a problem. So in other words, anxiety is an emotion. It's not an illness. If a person's nervous about something, it's not an illness. He's got a little bit of anxiety. However, it can rapidly decline into being in illness. A person can, chas v'shalom, become locked into this anxiety. And then it says, what is anxiety? Anxiety is a feeling of unease, like a worry or fear that can be mild or severe. Everyone feels anxious from time to time, and it usually passes once the situation is over. It can make our heart race. We might feel sweaty, shaky, or short of breath. Anxiety can also cause changes in our behavior, such as becoming overly careful or avoiding things that trigger anxiety. When anxiety becomes a problem, our worries can be out of proportion with relatively harmless situations. It can feel more intense or overwhelming and interfere with our everyday lives and relationships. And then they try giving a few tips about how to overcome anxiety. But what we're interested in is the tips which the Torah gives. And we have a pasuk which we just quoted, Leiv someach yetiv geah, that a merry heart enhances the body, whereas ruach nechea, a broken spirit, a wretched spirit, dries the bones. So we're told that a person has got to change his attitude. He's got within himself an ability to be leiv sameach. His mind should be happy. Now, how does a person have a happy attitude? So there's a story in the Gemara in Tanis where the Gemara talks about, as we know, the famous story of Choyni Hamagel, that if there was a lack of rain, there was this great tzaddik who would draw a circle, stand in the circle, and then daven and pray for the rain to come. He had a grandson, and his grandson was called Abba Chilkiah, and he was a great man as well. And this Abba Chilkiah, when there was a time of drought, the Chachamim sent a delegation of two rabbis to go to this gentleman called Abba Chilkiah to ask him to pray for rain. So they found him. He wasn't at home. He was out in the field, and he was working in the field. He was plowing a field. So they went over to him, and they greeted him, but he didn't reply to them. They waited till he had finished his job. He started walking home, and he had his coat over one shoulder and his spade and shovel over the other shoulder. As he's walking along, he's walking barefoot, and he came to some water. Then he put his shoes on and went through the water. He came through to some thorns, and he picked up his garment. He picked up his tunic above his legs, above his knees, so he could walk through the thorns and protect the garment from being torn. Story goes on that he went home, and then the Chachamim greeted him, and he prayed before they even asked him to pray. And when he asked them, what are they there for, he already knew. And he explained that the rain's already come. You don't need to have resource to come for my help. Hashem has already answered your prayers without me. But these two rabbis, they were quite wise to what went on. And they asked him several questions. He says, first of all, when we met you in the field and we greeted you, why did you not greet us back? She says, how can I spend time? I'm paid to work in the field. I'm not paid to have a chat with you. And therefore, I didn't want to waste even a minute of time. And therefore, I ignored you completely. I focused on the job. They asked him, why did you walk barefoot and you came to water, you put your shoes on, and you got them all wet in the water? So a normal person would do the opposite. He'll be wearing his shoes all along, and when he comes to water, he'll take his shoes off. So he answered, he says, when I'm walking, I can see what I'm treading on. But underwater, I can't see where my feet are going. So for protection, I put my shoes on for going in the water. They said, well, why did you lift up your coat, your garment, while you went through the thorns? So he said a very interesting answer. He says, the thorns, if they tear my clothing, the clothing will remain torn. But if they tear my skin, zeh ma'ala arucha, my skin will heal itself. Now, this is something, an observation, that the body has got an ability to heal itself. If a person gets a scratch, we've all had scratches and cuts, or cut ourselves with a knife or something. We've always had certain little misdemeanors. There's a whole science in how to understand how does the blood stop bleeding. It's called the coagulation process. How does the blood coagulate? Because when it reaches the air, it starts going hard and stems the bleeding. So there's something to stop it from bleeding. But if it stops too much, it will clog up all the blood in the veins. So it's got to stop clogging and clotting. And so there's a whole process of what the blood knows when to clot and when it stops clotting, and when it can't clot before the time, because otherwise chas v'shalom there'll be a clot in the vein. So therefore, there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed the body that there's a built-in mechanism of curing itself. Now, if that's true with your skin, which you don't seem to have any control over it, if a person cuts themselves, okay, if it's a deep cut, they'll need stitches. But if he just stems the bleeding will stop and it'll form a crust of dried blood over the wound, and eventually it'll cure itself. And it'll go completely, you won't even see a mark there. It'll totally regenerate itself. So the body has that ability to regenerate. Certainly the mind has got this ability. That even if a person's got mental health issues, sure, he needs to go and see a doctor, right? We're talking about just an anxiety problem. And what is anxiety? There's another pasuk in Mishle. And this pasuk says in chapter 12, 25. The pasuk says, Da'aga v'lev ish yashchena. If a person has worry in the heart of a man, yashchena, he should bow it down. V'dova toiv, and a good word, yisamchena, can make it cheerful. So the Malbim says that anxiety is one of the most destructive feelings a man can experience. And therefore, he explains that a person has an ability to overcome and override his emotions. And he says like this, that a person's got generally in his mind a set pattern of thought. For example, a person can think of what's good and what's bad from, how to react. He says, and when a situation comes along, he'll know how to react to that. For example, a person can arouse within himself a feeling of pride or a feeling of being humble. He can be jealous. He can have a desire. He can have these thoughts, but yet in your mind, you've got an ability to overcome the thoughts. So for example, you think, right, I need to have a new kitchen. All right, this kitchen is just not doing the job. It's 25 years old. The cupboards are getting a bit worn. So you think, I must buy a new kitchen. You phone up a kitchen fellow, and then he tells you, sure, we've got a kitchen with this. You can have this certain type of material for the tops and the materials. He's saying, how much will it be, just as a guide? And he says, £25,000. So you think, well, the whole house only cost £25,000 25 years ago. And now they just want £25,000 for a kitchen. So your mind then tells you £25,000, not worth it. You say, thank you very much. Or if you may feel it is worth it, and then you go ahead with it. But you've got in your mind how to deal with a certain instance. A person, he comes to a shop and he thinks he's been overcharged. First thing would be he would go over to the customer department and speak nicely and politely that he's been overcharged. If they kindly give him his money back, he's happy. If, however, they don't, so then that emotion of getting angry and getting forceful starts coming to the front. It may not be beneficial. Therefore, your mind can tell you, close it down, lower the pressure. Right, it's not appropriate here. There's people looking at you. Don't make a fuss if it's not really necessary. So the Malbim says that a person has this ability in his mind to regulate himself. He says part of the thoughts which a person can have is yidag. He can be concerned and worried about the future. And he may be worried, for example, maybe his house will get damaged, or maybe he'll lose some money, or maybe some tragedy, chas v'shalom, would befall him, or maybe his enemies will overcome himself. And then a person could fall into the trap, or we'll call it constant anxiety. He says, if, however, this anxiety is constant, he says, then it's very, very dangerous and it can destroy him. He says, what's the answer? What is the way around it? So the Pasuk here tells us there's two ways around it. The first one is, Dargo belevish. If a person has this worry, this concern in his mind, then the first thing he should do is to try and reduce the feelings. Yashchena means from lowering it. Don't take it out of proportion. Put it in a department where it doesn't deserve too much attention. It says, or yisamchena, or you should make it happy with a good word, meaning that divert your thoughts now from what you're thinking, which gives you anxiety. Try and change your thought and focus on something good. Of course, you can focus on the study of Torah, right? He says, or the Gemara explains that from this word, yashchena means two things. One says, yasichena, you should talk to a friend. And by talking to a friend, that friend can offer you advice, impartial advice. When you're in a situation, your emotions can get the better of you, and therefore your mind is clouded. You don't have the clarity to help yourself. Whereas you speak to someone who is not emotionally attached, then you have the ability that their good word can advise you, nothing to worry about. And they can advise you in a good manner. And that's what, in fact, the Gemara tells us. There's two opinions. One says yashchena, that try and dismiss these thoughts. Another one is yasichena, speak to your friend, let your friend try and set you right. And that's what it says in the verse, v'davar tov, a good word, yisamchena. And it's very important not to suffer in silence. This pasuk tells us, either you've got the ability to overcome your emotional problem yourself, or you must seek help from someone else, someone who's impartial, and have a good friend or a person, a mentor, someone who you can bounce your ideas off, someone, whoever it may be, who you feel confident in their opinion, and you'll listen to what they say. Therefore, choose them, because their word is davar tov yisamchena. A good word can change things around and give you happiness. So first the person's nervous, he's worried, and then he gets told nothing to worry about. There's, in a nutshell, a person has the ability of being more optimistic. So I printed off from a web page here. Is from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Now I thought, well, there must be a lot of anxious people and depressed people in America. I mean, look who they chose for president, right? So they, the people are in a situation where they can't change things. And therefore people, and they're living in a stressful life. So people must be anxious. And they give a whole long list of advice. Take time out, listen to music, right? Eat well, balanced meals, don't skip meals, limit alcohol and caffeine, which can aggravate anxiety and trigger panic attacks. It says get enough sleep. When stressed, your body needs additional sleep and rest. Exercise daily to help you feel good and maintain your health. Check out the fitness tips below. Take deep breaths. Inhale and exhale slowly. Count to 10 slowly. And if you can't do that, repeat and count to 20 if necessary. Do your best. Instead of aiming for perfection, which isn't possible, be proud of however close you get. Accept what you cannot that you cannot control everything. Put your stress in perspective. Is it really as bad as you think? Welcome humor. A good laugh goes a long way. And that's what we just learned. That Devorah tov yisamchena, a good word, a happy word, can pick you up. Then he says, maintain a positive attitude. Make an effort to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. And then, when the end of the list, talk to someone. Tell friends and family you're feeling overwhelmed and let them know how they can help you. Talk to a physician or therapist or professional help. Of course, if a person lets it go too long and he doesn't get any help, and then he needs real medical intervention, of course. But the idea is that there are simple tricks and there's help out there which a person can do for themselves. And another point here, it says optimism is a mental attitude characterized by hope and confidence in success and a positive future. Optimists are those who expect good things to happen, where pessimists instead predict unfavorable outcomes. So think to yourself, am I optimistic or am I pessimistic? I once met a pessimist and he said, pessimism is realism, right? In other words, he's convinced he's going to have a lousy life and everything's going to go wrong. So it's pessimistic. But if a person's optimistic, then he hopes things will turn out for good. And we'll see in a posuk in a minute how it actually helps. Optimistic attitudes are linked to a number of benefits, including better coping skills, lower stress levels, better physical health, and higher persistence when pursuing goals. Optimists tend to view hardships as learning experiences or temporary setbacks. Even the most miserable day holds the promise for them that tomorrow will probably be better. Always think optimistically, it's going to go better now. In fact, this idea shouldn't confuse it with bitochen. Bitochen, the Chazon Ish explains, that whatever situation you are in, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fully aware of it, and he's doing everything for your benefit, for your physical benefit, your spiritual benefit, for your benefit in the world to come. Hashem knows exactly what happens, and he is doing everything for good and for your benefit. We may not appreciate it at the time, but ultimately it's a concept of bitachon. The Chazon Ish says, don't think bitachon means that if you have two ways, and for example, you buy a lottery ticket, so you think, if I've got bitachon, it means I'm going to win. And if I don't have bitachon, then I'm going to lose. He says, that's not bitachon. He says, the whole time a prophet hasn't told you what the winning numbers are, there's no guarantee you're going to win on a lottery. You can talk to yourself and think you have faith, you have faith, you have trust, you have bitachon, but in actual fact, that's not going to change. Bitachon is that even if I don't win the lottery, that's what Hashem wants. The very best for my benefit and my family's benefit is if I don't win £100 million. Everyone who wins £100 million says at first, it's not going to change my life. Oh, it does. It does. There was once a list of all the people who won huge amounts of money on the lottery, and it was when they won, and a few years later, what happened to them, right? Not all of them had a happy life afterwards, right? All of a sudden, things change. They become a target of people's jealousy, and it's not always for their betterment. So optimism here is just a separate attitude, apart from bitachon, that a person, he should think that tomorrow will be better. If you always see the brighter side of things, you may feel that you experience more positive events in your life than others. Find yourself less stressed and even enjoy greater health benefits. So we see that a person can change his outlook by this idea of having an optimistic approach to things. So I'm just looking for the posuk where it brings this out. This is it, I think. Chapter 18, verse 14. Ruach ish yechalkel machaleim. The spirit of a man can sustain his illness. V'ruach necheya, but a bad spirit, mi yisra'ena, who can uplift it? Rashi explains that the spirit of a man, even if he's a strong man, a gever, an ish, and he doesn't allow worry to enter his heart, and he accepts everything that kol haba alav b'simcha or b'chiba, that whatever the Almighty sends in his direction, he accepts it happily with love, because he knows that ultimately Hashem is in direct control with every facet of his life. So ruach ish, the spirit of the man, yechalkel machaleo, it can feed an illness. What does that mean? That even in his illness, ein koichoi sa me'alav, his strength does not depart from him. Because God forbid, if a person's ill, the biggest danger is that he can lose his spirit and his strength of heart, strength of mind. And then, chas v'sholem, his body can go downhill. Whereas if he's got a ruach ish, if he's got this spirit of optimism inside him, and that he accepts God's desire with happiness and with love, then that will give him energy in his illness. There's another pasuk as well. This is more a pasuk which only someone like Shleima Melech could teach us. The pasuk says in Perek Yud Test 19, pasuk Yud Zayin, says, Malva Hashem choynein dal. You lend to the Almighty if you have graciousness with the poor, ugumuloi yishalem loi, and his reward will be paid for him. Now, Hashem gives us everything. He doesn't owe us any favors. Right? It's not that Hashem has to do anything for us. Whatever we get is from the graciousness of the Almighty. However, the pasuk here says, you've got a method of lending something to Hashem, that he owes you a favor now, he has to repay you. And what is that? That is if you have charitable acts and you help the poor. Rashi explains that Malva Hashem choynein dal, you lend to God by having compassion on the poor, ugumula yishalem lai, and therefore your reward will be paid by him. Says Rashi, kishayechle, if a person becomes ill, veyatelomos, and he's approaching death's door, sidkosoi, your righteousness, the charity you've done, malitza olav, will stand up for you and be a protection for you. Lifnei midas hadin, before the doors of judgment. Loima, to say, ha'oni, in other words, you give to a poor person, you pick up his spirits, you give him energy, you give him life, you give him vitality by helping him out. By doing that act of charity, you've created an angel which will go upstairs and will be a protector for you. And even if a person's ill and really he deserves to depart from the world, that charitable act he did will go upstairs to the Almighty and will say like this. This is all a quote from Rashi. Ha'oni hoisa nafshoi mefal cheses lotzes. This poor man, his soul was leaving him. The poor man was brokenhearted and dejected, and he was throwing in the towel. He didn't have any energy to go on with life. It was getting too much for him. And you came and you lifted up his spirit. So the poor man was at death's door himself. Lord says, whether it was through hunger and famine. But you, by giving him charity, you've given him food, and the poor man who had nothing to eat, now he's revived. So af ani achzir loy nafshay. So Hashem says, I owe you a favor, and therefore I'm going to restore your soul as well. As we know, the pasuk says, Tzedakah tatzil mimomes, charity saves from death. So not only a good attitude, says the Mishle, will help your body physically, if you're optimistic and you seek advice and help from others if you need it, but also spiritually, by giving charitable acts, you're going to gain the most from it. And therefore, a person should never feel that he's losing anything by being kind and charitable, because you stand to gain the most yourself. And then by doing the acts of charity, Malva Hashem, it's like you're lending money to the Almighty, and He has to therefore pay back this reward. Therefore, Gemula Yeshalem Lai, your reward will be paid back to you. So we see a few ideas, a few pasukim which I've just chosen, like random, that a person's got to have a good attitude, be pleasant, the ways of the Torah, ways of pleasantness, always try choosing a peaceful outcome. The Torah is a tree of life. If you grab onto it, grab onto the lessons, think optimistically, try and be upbeat, never become downcast and downhearted. If a person's too anxious, seek help, talk to someone to try and help you out. Also do tzedakah, do charity, and the zechusim will last forever. Okay, thank you for